What would you do if you found $3,000 on the side of the road, and no one was watching? Would you keep it? Or would you walk 15 miles through a snowstorm to give it back? 9-year-old Emily Carter never thought she'd face that choice. But on a gray November afternoon, outside the tiny farming town of Willow Creek, Montana, that's exactly what happened. Emily lived in a weather-beaten trailer, the kind where the wind whistles through thin walls and the floor tilts if you walk too quickly. Her great-uncle Earl, the man she'd been left with after her parents died, spent more time with a whiskey bottle than with her. He wasn't cruel exactly, but he wasn't kind either. His way of caring for her was leaving a can of soup on the counter and telling her to figure it out. By the time she was 7, Emily knew how to fix a leaky pipe with duct tape, how to stretch a single loaf of bread for a week, and how to disappear when Earl's temper ran short. What she didn't know was what it felt like to be truly safe. That afternoon, she had been at the town's harvest festival, stacking hay bales for $1 an hour. Her fingers ached from the cold, and her pockets jingled with just enough change for a stale cinnamon roll from the last food stall. She was walking home down the gravel road, her breath fogging in the air, when she spotted it half buried in dirt, scuffed and damp from the frost. A leather wallet. Her small hands turned it over. Inside, a driver's license, credit cards, and she froze. 3 crisp stacks of bills, each wrapped in a bank band. $3,000. Her heart thudded. The name on the license read Thomas Granger. Everyone in town knew him, one of the richest ranchers in Montana, owner of thousands of acres, and famous for being, as Earl once called him, tight-fisted Tom. People said he could buy a new truck every week but wouldn't give a dime to the church bake sale. Emily stood in the road, the wind tugging at her jacket, staring at the money. $3,000 could buy her warm boots, a coat without holes, real groceries. It could mean not having to work in the biting cold after school. For a moment, the temptation was so sharp it hurt. Then, she remembered her mother's voice. Faint, like it was coming from another lifetime. Your name is worth more than gold, Em. Don't ever sell it for less. She closed the wallet. There was no phone at the trailer. No bus to take her to Granger's ranch. And when she asked a neighbor for a ride, the man laughed. 15 miles for a wallet? Not worth the gas, kid. So Emily started walking. The sky darkened fast. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of snow. By the time the first flakes fell, her toes were numb inside her thin sneakers. She pulled her jacket tighter, but the cold cut through like a blade. Halfway there, crossing a frozen ditch, her foot slipped, plunging into icy water. The shock made her gasp. She scrambled out, her socks soaked, each step now burning with cold. An hour later, she heard a low growl. A stray dog stood by the roadside, ribs showing, eyes fixed on her. Emily's pulse hammered. She reached into her pocket, found the small piece of bread she'd saved from lunch, and tossed it toward the animal. The dog snatched it and slunk away into the snow. She kept walking. Sometime after dark, headlights swept over her. A pickup truck slowed beside her, window rolling down. The driver, a leathery-faced man she'd seen around town, spotted the cash when she opened the wallet to check the address. "I'll make it worth your while if you give me half," he said. No one would know. Her fingers tightened around the leather. She thought about warmth. About food. About a life where she didn't have to count every penny. The temptation clawed at her. And then, again, her mother's voice, stronger this time. "No matter how cold it gets, Em, don't lose who you are." Emily shook her head. No, sir. The man cursed under his breath, drove away, taillights vanishing into the snow. By the time she reached the gates of Granger Ranch, it was nearly midnight. Her legs shook from exhaustion. The ranch hands didn't believe her story. They told her to go home, to get lost before she froze. But Emily didn't leave. She curled up against a wooden fence post, wallet clutched to her chest, snow piling in her hair. Somewhere beyond those gates was the man who'd lost it. Somewhere inside her was the stubborn hope that maybe, just maybe, returning it would matter. The night was silent except for the wind. Snowflakes landed on Emily's eyelashes and melted down her cheeks, mixing with the sting of exhaustion. She tried to keep her eyes open, but her body begged for rest. Somewhere in the distance, a faint crunching sound broke through the quiet hoofbeats. She lifted her head, vision blurry. A tall figure on horseback emerged from the curtain of white. The rider stopped, dismounted, and knelt beside her. "What on earth?" His voice was low, rough from the cold. Emily blinked up at him. "Are you Mr. Granger?" The man frowned, taking in her shivering form, the soaked sneakers, the wallet clutched in her small hands. "That's me." "What's going on, kid?" She forced the words past her chattering teeth. "I found this. It's yours. I walked from town to give it back." Thomas Granger glanced down, recognition flickering in his eyes as he saw his own name on the driver's license. He took the wallet, then looked back at her. Really looked. "You walked here? In this weather?" Emily nodded. He exhaled slowly, like someone trying to piece together a puzzle. "Get inside. You'll freeze out here." Minutes later, Emily sat in the ranch's kitchen, wrapped in a thick wool blanket. A steaming mug of cocoa sat between her hands. Her cheeks were pink from the heat, but she still hadn't stopped shivering. Granger leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Do you know you're the first person to bring one of these back?" She frowned. "One of, what?" "The wallet," he said. "I've been leaving them around town for 2 years. Different spots. Always with cash inside. My mother, before she passed, she used to say the real wealth in a town isn't land or money, it's honesty. She asked me to find out if Willow Creek still had any." He gave a humorless chuckle. "Turns out, I've been losing a lot of wallets." Emily's eyes widened. "You mean, you left this on purpose?" "That's right. Every single one disappeared. Until now." Silence hung between them for a moment. The wind rattled against the windows, the only sound. "You could have kept it," he said finally. "Most would have." Her fingers tightened around the cocoa mug. "I wanted to. But my mom, she always said your name is worth more than gold." Granger's gaze softened, something unreadable flickering there. "She sounds like she was a smart woman." She was. Emily's voice dropped. "But she died when I was little." The rancher studied her a moment longer, then pushed away from the counter. "Finish your cocoa. Then get some rest." The next morning, Emily woke in a warm bed, so soft it felt like she was sinking into a cloud. For a fleeting moment, she thought she'd dreamed the whole thing. Then the smell of bacon drifted through the air, and she followed it to the kitchen. Granger was there, flipping pancakes on the griddle. "Eat up, kid. Big day." She hesitated. "Big day?" He slid a plate toward her. "I'm taking you into town. Got some things to set up." Emily didn't know what that meant, but she was too hungry to ask. She ate in silence, every bite warming her from the inside. By noon, they were in a small law office, the kind with faded curtains and a desk covered in stacks of paper. A woman in a navy suit smiled at Emily, then at Granger. "This is the girl?" "This is her," he confirmed. "Set up the education trust. 1 million." Emily nearly dropped the mug of water she'd been holding. "A million?" Granger glanced at her. "You earned it." She shook her head. "I didn't do anything special." "You did exactly what most people wouldn't," he said simply. "That's worth more than you realize." The woman began filling out forms, asking for Emily's full name, date of birth. She answered quietly, still trying to understand if this was real. Later that afternoon, Granger drove her back to the ranch. But instead of the trailer park road, they turned down a gravel path leading to a small white farmhouse. Fresh paint gleamed against the winter sky. Smoke curled from the chimney. Through the frosted window, she could see a couch, a dining table, and a bed with a quilt so bright it made her eyes water. "This is for you," Granger said. "No rent. Heat works. Roof doesn't leak. Thought you might like a change from the trailer." Emily stood frozen. "Why?" He shrugged. "Because no kid should have to choose between doing the right thing and surviving." She didn't know how to respond. So she just whispered, "Thank you." He gave a small nod. "Come on. Let's get you moved in." As she stepped inside the warm farmhouse, Emily felt something she hadn't in years, a strange, cautious flutter in her chest. It might have been hope. The first night in the farmhouse, Emily lay awake under the bright patchwork quilt, listening to the creak of the old walls in the wind. The room was warm, but her mind kept circling one question: why would a man like Thomas Granger do all this for her? In Willow Creek, favors always came with strings. And people like Earl had taught her to keep her guard up. The next morning, she woke to the sound of a knock on her door. Granger stood outside, wearing a worn flannel and a cowboy hat dusted with snow. "Hope you like work," he said. Emily blinked. "What kind of work?" "Ranch work." "You didn't think I'd just hand over a house and money without teaching you something useful, did you?" There was a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. She followed him across the yard. The air was sharp with the smell of hay and horses. Ranch hands moved with practiced efficiency, hauling feed, checking fences, brushing down the animals. Granger led her to the stables. "You'll start here. Learn the ropes. And when you're ready, I'll show you more." It wasn't glamorous. Her first hours were spent sweeping the floors and filling water buckets until her arms ached. But the work kept her warm, and for the first time in a long while, she felt useful. By noon, her stomach growled. In the ranch's mess hall, a tall man named Charlie slid a plate of stew in front of her. "Boss says you're the one who returned the wallet. Good on you, kid." She didn't know what to say, so she nodded and focused on the stew. That afternoon, Granger showed her the ledger room, rows of dusty books and neat columns of numbers. "Running a ranch isn't just about horses," he explained. "It's about keeping track of every penny. You've got to respect the work and the people doing it." Emily leaned over the desk. "You do all this?" He chuckled. "Not all. That's why I've got help. But I want you to understand how it works." As the days passed, Emily settled into a rhythm. Morning chores, writing lessons, afternoons in the ledger room. She still went to school in town, but every evening she came back to the farmhouse, where the heat was steady and there was always food on the table. Still, she kept her distance. She spoke little at meals, rarely smiled, and never asked questions about Granger's life. Trust wasn't something she could give easily. One evening, after mucking stalls, she saw Granger sitting alone in the barn, staring at an old photograph. It was a woman, smiling, hair pulled back, eyes warm. Emily lingered at the doorway. "Your wife?" He looked up, surprised. "My mother." "She's the one who told you about honesty?" "Yes." She believed a person's worth was measured by the good they left behind. His voice softened. "She wanted me to remember that." Emily nodded. "Sounds like my mom." For a moment, they just sat there in the quiet, the smell of hay and wood around them. Something unspoken passed between them, two people carrying the weight of someone they'd loved and lost. But just when life began to feel steady, trouble came. It was a Saturday morning when a county truck pulled up to the ranch. Two officials stepped out, clipboards in hand. Granger met them at the gate, but Emily could hear the conversation from where she stood. "We've had reports that this child's guardian didn't consent to her living here," one said. "Her great-uncle Earl is requesting she be returned to his care immediately." Emily's stomach dropped. Earl hadn't wanted her before, why now? Granger's jaw tightened. "She's safe here." "I'll fight it." The official shook his head. "That's for the court to decide." Emily stayed hidden behind the fence until they left. When Granger came to find her, she was sitting on the steps of the farmhouse, knees pulled to her chest. "I'm not going back," she said flatly. "You won't," he replied. "But we'll have to go through the process. It might get ugly." Ugly was an understatement. In the days that followed, Earl showed up in town, spreading rumors about Granger, saying he was using Emily for free labor, that he'd tricked her into staying. The whispers spread fast. Some people stopped looking Emily in the eye. Others asked questions that made her cheeks burn. At night, she lay awake again, but now the warmth of the farmhouse didn't help. The thought of losing this life she was just starting to believe in, pressed on her chest like a weight. One evening, she found Granger at the kitchen table, papers spread out. "What happens if we lose?" she asked. He looked at her for a long moment before answering. "Then we start over. Somewhere else if we have to. But I'm not letting them take you somewhere you're not safe." It wasn't a promise she fully believed yet, but it was enough to keep a small, stubborn flame alive inside her. And she knew, if this was a fight, she'd fight with him. The courtroom in Helena was nothing like Emily imagined. She thought it would be like the movies, grand and echoing, but it was small, with pale walls and the faint smell of coffee. The only thing grand about it was how big it made her problems feel. Earl sat at the petitioner's table in a stiff jacket he'd probably borrowed. His eyes slid to her and then away, like she was just another chore to be done with. Beside him, his lawyer flipped through papers with quick, sharp movements. On the other side, Thomas Granger sat calm, his hands folded, his own lawyer murmuring quietly in his ear. Emily sat between them at the witness bench, small and stiff, feeling the weight of every gaze in the room. The judge, a tall man with kind eyes but a firm voice, called the hearing to order. Earl's lawyer was quick to speak. "My client is the child's legal guardian. She left his home without permission, and Mr. Granger has no legal standing to keep her." Emily clenched her fists. It wasn't leaving without permission, it was surviving. But no one asked her yet. When it was Granger's turn, his lawyer stood. "Your Honor, the girl was found in dangerous conditions alone, unsupervised, and without adequate heat or food. Mr. Granger has provided shelter, schooling, and stability." Earl snorted. "Stability? She's shoveling stalls for free like some hired hand." Emily couldn't stay quiet. "I'm not a hired hand. I wanted to help." The judge's eyes shifted to her. "Miss Carter, you'll have a chance to speak in just a moment." That moment came sooner than she thought. She was sworn in, the Bible cold under her small hand, and then the questions began. Earl's lawyer leaned forward. "Emily, has Mr. Granger ever made you work without pay?" "No. I live in the house he gave me. He doesn't make me do anything." "Did he tell you that you could keep the wallet you found?" "No. He gave me something better." The lawyer arched a brow. "Better than $3,000? Emily's eyes darted to Granger. He gave a small nod. "He gave me a home. And a chance to be someone my mom would be proud of." For a second, the courtroom went quiet. The lawyer shifted in his seat. No further questions. When Granger took the stand, he spoke simply. He didn't try to charm anyone. He told the judge about the wallet test, about his mother's belief in honesty, about how Emily had walked 15 miles through a snowstorm rather than keep what wasn't hers. But Earl's lawyer pounced. "Mr. Granger, isn't it true that you've never been a legal guardian before? That you're a bachelor with no experience raising a child?" "That's true," Granger admitted. "But I've run a ranch for 20 years. I know what it means to take care of those who depend on you." "And isn't it also true you've been known as Tight-Fisted Tom? That you're not exactly known for generosity?" A flicker of a smile crossed Granger's face. "Maybe. But people change. And if I've learned anything from this girl, it's that change is worth the effort." The hearing stretched into the afternoon. Witnesses spoke, neighbors who'd seen Emily working hard at the ranch, others who'd heard Earl yelling at her in the trailer park. Some supported Earl, saying blood was blood. Others backed Granger, saying safety mattered more. When the judge finally called for a recess, Emily slumped in her chair, drained. In the hallway, she tugged on Granger's sleeve. "Are we going to win?" He crouched so they were eye level. "I don't know. But I know we'll keep fighting. And I know you're worth fighting for." It wasn't the certainty she wanted, but it was something. Back in the courtroom, the judge asked if Emily had anything she wanted to say before he made his decision. She swallowed hard. Her palms were damp. "I don't care about money," she began. "I care about not being cold every night. I care about someone asking if I've eaten. Mr. Granger does that. Earl doesn't." Her voice wavered. "I'm not saying he's bad. I'm just saying, he doesn't see me. Mr. Granger does." The judge studied her for a long moment before speaking. "This case isn't simple. But the welfare of the child is the priority. I'll need time to review everything before making a ruling." The gavel came down. The hearing was over for now. That night, back at the farmhouse, Emily sat at the kitchen table, tracing patterns in the wood. Granger poured her a glass of milk. "You did well today." She shook her head. "What if it's not enough?" "Then we'll make it enough," he said. For the first time, she believed him. The judge's decision came a week later. The air in the courtroom felt heavy as everyone stood. Emily's heart was a drumbeat in her chest. In the matter of custody for Emily Carter, the judge began. This court awards temporary guardianship to her legal guardian, Earl Carter, pending further review. The words hit her like a punch to the stomach. She didn't hear the rest, the legal jargon about oversight, the mention of social services visits. All she heard was temporary guardianship to Earl Carter. Earl smirked as he stood, straightening his borrowed jacket. "Come on, girl," he said. Emily's feet felt rooted to the ground. She looked at Granger. His jaw was set, his eyes steady, but there was something in them she hadn't seen before, helplessness. He stepped forward. "You'll be okay, Emily. I promise I'll fix this." She wanted to believe him, but promises felt paper thin in that moment. The drive back to the trailer park was silent except for the rattle of Earl's old truck. The closer they got, the colder she felt, not from the winter air, but from the memory of those thin walls and the hollow quiet of nights alone. The trailer hadn't changed. Same peeling paint. Same sagging porch. Inside, the smell of stale beer hit her. A single space heater hummed in the corner, barely keeping the chill away. Earl tossed her bag onto the couch. "You can sleep there till I clean out your room." "My room?" she asked, though she already knew it was just a storage space now. He shrugged. "Got my tools in there. You'll be fine on the couch." That night, she lay awake staring at the cracked ceiling. She thought about the farmhouse, the warmth, the smell of coffee in the morning, the way the quilt felt like it was holding her together. She thought about Granger's steady voice when he said she was worth fighting for. 2 days later, Earl put her to work clearing snow from the driveway with a bent shovel. She was still shivering when he told her to run to the store for cigarettes. "And don't be long," he barked. In the store, a woman she knew from town eyed her. "Back living with Earl?" Emily nodded. "Shame," the woman said softly. "We all thought you'd caught a break." That night, Emily overheard Earl on the phone. His voice was low, but she caught enough. "Course I'm getting money out of it. You think I'm keeping the kid for free?" She gripped the arm of the couch so tightly her fingers hurt. The next day, a social worker stopped by. Earl poured on the charm, talking about family bonds and keeping her close to her roots. Emily stayed quiet, afraid to make things worse. But later, she slipped a note into the pocket of the social worker's coat before she left. "I'm not safe here." 3 nights later, Granger showed up. Not at the door. Earl wouldn't have let him in. Instead, Emily heard a knock on her bedroom window. She pulled back the curtain and saw him standing in the snow, coat dusted white. "Pack your things," he whispered. "I can't," she whispered back. "The court." "I know. But I also know the law says if you're in danger, you don't have to stay. And I've got proof now." She didn't ask what proof. She didn't care. She grabbed her small bag, just clothes, the photo of her mother, and the blanket from the farmhouse she'd smuggled out when she left. They moved quickly, the snow crunching under their feet. The truck was warm, and for the first time in days, she felt like she could breathe. Back at the ranch, Charlie was waiting with hot stew. Granger didn't say much, just told her she was safe now, and they'd let the lawyers handle the rest. But safety still felt fragile. The next morning, Earl showed up at the ranch gates with the sheriff. Emily watched from the window as voices rose, hands gestured sharply. The sheriff eventually left, but not before handing Granger a stack of papers. He came inside, his expression tight. Court date's been moved up. We'll have one last hearing. It's make or break this time. Emily nodded, but inside, fear gnawed at her. She'd seen how easily things could be taken away. That night, she sat on the porch steps, the cold seeping into her bones. She thought about her mother's words, "Your name is worth more than gold." She thought about the fence post where she curled up in the snow that first night, and how it had felt to finally be seen. If this was the last fight, she was ready to give everything she had. The final hearing was set for a Friday morning. Emily barely slept the night before. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the judge's gavel coming down, sending her back to the trailer park for good. When they arrived at the courthouse, the air inside felt heavier than the Montana winter outside. Earl was already there, wearing the same stiff jacket from before, his expression smug. Granger leaned down to her level. "No matter what happens, remember you did nothing wrong. You just told the truth." The judge entered, and the room settled into silence. Earl's lawyer went first, his voice smooth but sharp. He spoke about family ties, legal guardianship, the sanctity of blood. He claimed Granger was overstepping, that this was about pride and money, not the child's welfare. Then Granger's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, this isn't about pride. This is about safety, stability, and the well-being of a 9-year-old girl who has already lost more than any child should." She called the social worker to the stand. The woman confirmed receiving Emily's note, "I'm not safe here," and testified about the state of Earl's home. She described the cold, the lack of proper bedding, and Earl's own words about getting money out of it. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Earl shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Finally, the judge looked to Emily. "Miss Carter, is there anything you'd like to say before I make my decision?" Her throat tightened, but she forced herself to stand. "When my mom was alive, she told me your name is worth more than gold. I didn't understand it then. I do now. Mr. Granger didn't have to help me, but he did. He gave me a place where I feel seen, where I feel safe. I don't want to go back to a place where I'm invisible." She sat down, heart pounding. The judge removed his glasses, polished them slowly, and then spoke. "The court finds that Emily Carter's best interests are served in the custody of Thomas Granger. Full guardianship is granted effective immediately." The gavel struck. It took a second for the words to sink in. Emily turned to Granger. He gave her a small nod, a rare smile breaking through. Earl muttered something under his breath and left without looking back. Outside the courthouse, the winter sun was pale but bright. Emily took a deep breath of the cold air. It felt different now, sharper but cleaner. That afternoon, they returned to the ranch. The staff had somehow found out the news. Charlie clapped Granger on the back. Someone had baked a pie. Emily wasn't used to celebrations, but the warmth in the room felt like it was wrapping around her just as much as the quilt on her bed. Over the next few months, she settled fully into ranch life. She learned to saddle a horse without help, to read the ledger books without getting lost in the numbers. She still went to school in town, but now she came home to a place that was hers. One spring morning, Granger handed her an envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a trust account statement. "This is yours when you're ready," he said. "No rush. But I want you to know it's there." Years passed. Emily grew taller, stronger. When she graduated high school, she used part of the trust to start the Willow Creek Housing Project, building affordable homes for families who'd fallen through the cracks like she once had. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, townspeople gathered to watch. Emily stood beside Granger, who looked older now but just as steady. She gave a short speech, her voice carrying over the crowd. "I know what it's like to need help and not know where it will come from. This project is for the kids who need a safe place to sleep, and for the people who believe they deserve it." The applause was loud, but what mattered most to her was seeing Granger in the front row, clapping with quiet pride. That evening, after the celebration, Emily walked out to the far edge of the ranch, where the old fence post still stood. The wood was weathered, the grain split from years of wind and snow. She rested her hand on it, remembering the night she'd sat there shivering, clutching a wallet she could have kept but didn't. She smiled. Not because everything was perfect, life still had its storms, but because she knew who she was. And that was worth more than gold. She turned back toward the farmhouse, its windows glowing in the fading light. Home. If stories like this warm something deep inside you, pull up a chair and stay a while. Subscribe, and let's keep walking these roads together.